The example I always use is if you went to the farm and you got the best grass-fed regenerative steak like money could buy,
Hmm.
and one time you ate it at noon outside while you're grounded and like your shirt's off, versus you're eating it at 10 p.m. right before you go to bed under blue light, like your body is going to respond totally different, and it's the highest quality food you could buy. So again, it's all the environment, like your time, the place, like are you stressed when you're eating? All that stuff plays a major role on how your body utilizes that food.
Have you ever noticed that with certain people, whenever you start talking about how important light is for biology and weight loss and health, they get really mad and they're like, no, food really matters. Food is so important. And you're like, yeah, I know. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that light is also important. So I don't know why it triggers people that way. We kind of have these sort of all or nothing ideas in our head. And when we got new information that doesn't have a place to fit, I think sometimes, we get a little reactive. But here's how I think about it. If we said to somebody, if you're not well hydrated, if you're not drinking enough water, it doesn't matter what you eat, you're still going to be tired and you're probably still going to have problems with your health and your weight loss attempts. And people will be like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like you should also drink water, quality water, and be hydrated in addition to eating well. But for some reason, when we say no, light matters, it's like everyone freaks out. So that's why I thought it would be really fun to have a conversation with Ethan Okunas, because he is a registered dietitian. And so he works deep into the food, deep in the food paradigm. He also works sort of across the dimensions of healthcare in the way that it's unfolding at this moment in time. So you have your sort of conventional healthcare that's the default for most people. And then you have independent healthcare where you end up with the really proactive people, the deep researchers, the people who've tried everything else and didn't find what they needed. And usually people are in one or the other of those dimensions. And Ethan is in both. So it's interesting because he has a day job working at a retirement residence where he sees people who were told by their doctor that they need to eat better, so they're sent to see him. Then he also has an independent coaching business where he gets all of us weirdos from the internet. I say that with love. So it was interesting to have that conversation as well. But Ethan has done a huge amount of research into light and how it affects our bodies. And he is a registered dietitian who thinks light might matter more than food. I'm not saying food doesn't matter. Oh, I'm not saying that, for the love of God. But, he makes some points. And he's written a fantastic book called Quantum Nutrition, which if you're in deep nerd mode on all this stuff, I highly recommend that you pick up. All right, before we go, don't forget to visit my friends at where, bondcharge.com. And you can put QBC in the discount box at checkout. Also, if you haven't downloaded the My Circadian app, it is time to do so. The vitamin D window is here, and it is a great way to track how much vitamin D you are making in the time that you are able to be outside with your skin exposed to our beautiful full spectrum rays from the sun who fills us with life. Also, I just ordered a light machine from LifeWave where David Schmidt has figured out how to put light into water. I'm still trying to figure out how he did that. I'm going to have him back on the podcast to explain, but I'm really super excited. So I'll keep you all updated about that on some upcoming intros, and also updates on many big changes are afoot. Big changes are coming to the QBC. I'll tell you all about it very soon. Enjoy my chat with Ethan. Ethan Okunas, welcome to the QBC podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This is going to be fun. Okay, so Ethan, let's start just with your background, how you started out in health and wellness, and then how you crossed over to the quantum side.
Sure. So I guess when I was a kid, just to go back to the beginning, my parents were always pretty into the alternative health stuff, but it was mostly food. Neither of them were born in America, actually, so they knew what real food actually tastes like. So even when I was a kid, they were buying like raw milk, like way before it was cool. Now like everyone is buying and drinking raw milk, but back then it was like one farm within like an hour and a half, as opposed to right now there's like so many anywhere you go. But they always went to farmers markets. They shopped at Whole Foods, that sort of thing. I remember even when I was a kid, my dad like used to go in like random like rabbit holes online. He was talking about magnetism and stuff like that. But I didn't really think much of it. Like this guy's kind of crazy. Like he's a super smart guy. He actually majored in math at school. But he yeah, I guess he's not a great teacher as far as that goes. So he's like, oh yeah, magnetism and Wi-Fi is bad. But then there was never really any like practical application. So just like there wasn't really any major takeaways, and I would say like indoctrination in school is definitely real as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I also happen to wrestle, so nutrition, because wrestling is a weight class sport, nutrition plays a major role because you got to make weight. So I was like cutting weight, and like food was always a big thing. So then when I went to
Okay.
college, I did my bachelor's in nutrition and fitness, and then ended up doing my master's in like food and nutrition, and then I ended up becoming a registered dietitian. But I can't really say, I was talking about last week on a podcast too. I can't really say anything I learned in school was necessarily helpful or has any application for this stuff whatsoever. Maybe like reading papers, and like I did take like organic chemistry, biochemistry. I do think, I'm sure there's like some kind of perspective where what I learned is probably not like 100% right on, but I do think the foundation was probably pretty close. Again, I'm not a chemist, so I don't necessarily know, but I have found it valuable when I'm like reading papers. And we did take classes on like how to like actually read research and interpret it, which has been helpful, especially for when I was writing my book and I'm actually looking for all these studies. And it is surprising, like when you know how to find research, especially with like now with like AI, and you can, it's so much easier to find studies. Like I even recently found the study with like if you exercise outside, you actually get more benefits than if you're exercising inside. And like I never knew that was like an actual study. I think it's the only one I found though. But it is like easier now than ever to find that sort of research. But I would say I did that, and then I was kind of like, I knew sleep was important, just because if you're an athlete, that's when you recover, that's when you repair. So sleep was always important. What you're eating, super important. In wrestling, even more so, because again, you're trying to make weight. So especially when you're in season, like you're counting calories, you're staying on top of it. You have to like basically like drive fast to make weight, depending on your weight class and how you go about it, and if you're smart about it or not so smart about it. And then obviously you're exercising, you're lifting, that sort of thing. So I already had like a decent foundation. And when you think about like a whole circadian stuff anyways, which I'll get to in a second, it is kind of just optimizing sleep. Like if you think about it, like the more daylight you get during the day and the darker your nights, the better you're going to sleep. But it's kind of like not one of those things, like you kind of learn about backwards. You're like, oh, like sleep is important, but you don't actually really learn how to make your sleep better
Right.
and more
Like the
effective.
message the kids get is, yeah, sleep is important, so go to sleep.
Yeah,
But there's not a lot
exactly.
of explaining how to get good sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And your training and your master's degree definitely come through in the way that you're able to structure the book that you wrote.
Mhm.
And, the it's interesting, like the content of it may not be highly relevant to you anymore, but I definitely see the benefits of that kind of rigorous and structured learning
Yeah.
you're that you're now bringing to this newer research.
Yeah, I feel like I've always just like exploring stuff for myself. Like I've always been into reading. Like right now, I just read a lot about like quantum and health stuff. But I was always reading anyways. Like I wouldn't be like a fan of like sitting in a class or even taking a course of my own. It's kind of not my style. Not to get off on too big of a tangent, but for like when I was doing jiu-jitsu, actually after I finished wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a way to develop skills called the ecological approach to learning and skill development. And basically, the idea is instead of like drilling, you're trying to discover stuff for yourself under resistance. So that's how I think about learning this stuff too, is it's easier to just like go off on your own and try to figure out how it applies to you, because everyone is different and how you interpret like the same book is going to be totally different. So I think, like, at least for me, I didn't really love the structure. I thought school was easy, but not necessarily helpful. But I think for some people, the structure may be like more effective than others.
Yeah. I love that, the ecological learning. I mean,
Yeah.
that's life, right? Like
Yeah.
we put
Exactly.
ourselves into situations, we take
Exactly.
on a bit of risk, we face a bit of pressure, and we adapt and move
Exactly. Yep.
forward. And yeah, at school is not like that much,
Not at all.
and
Yeah.
it could be a little bit more like that. And I also agree with you. It's, and we were talking about this a bit before we turned the camera on, right? But there's like that fine line between over over sciencing people who aren't who aren't
Yeah.
interested. But also, if we don't have some understanding as to why we're doing something, in my experience as a coach, people just stop doing it. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm supposed to wear blue blockers when I watch TV." Okay. And they'll be like, "Oh, I feel better, my sleep's better, I have energy." But then like we forget. If it's just like a protocol that someone handed us, we forget. Whereas if we internalize why we're doing it, I think that helps to stay on the path. But also we learn that by just putting ourselves out there.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So was there a moment or an experience or a series of experiences where you were like, wait a minute, exercise and food are not the whole story here?
Yeah, I would say I had two things come together at the same time. So my previous job, I was working like outpatient for weight loss as a dietitian.
Hmm.
And basically, I kind of just talked about the same stuff I was just mentioning, like exercise. I thought I was like being a good dietitian because most dietitians just talk about food and that's it. But I was like, oh, I'm talking about sleep and exercise on top of the food thing. And so I thought I was being good. I always talked about how like if you get 10,000 steps, like your all-cause mortality goes way lower. And now I'm just like, oh, that's probably because they're just walking outside, and that's probably why. But I just
Yes.
that never clicked for me. And then I was kind of doing that job. I went down the like microplastics rabbit hole and all that stuff. So I thought that was cool. So I was always like open-minded to this. And then I got a podcast sent to me by my buddy. He was we did jiu-jitsu together, and he was always like drinking raw milk, but he already had like grounding sheets like 7 years ago. So he was like way ahead of it. And I was just like, this guy's weird. He doesn't really know what he's talking about. I mean, I've heard about grounding before, but I think sometimes it just like doesn't hit home. You know what I mean? Like you hear about something, you're like, oh, like that's cool.
Yeah.
And then you might like go outside barefoot and you're like, oh, I'm grounding, but you never make it intentional. So he sent me a podcast with Jack, and I didn't understand anything about it. But then he
Yeah.
sent me a few podcasts with Alexis, and Alexis's were like way more coherent and they were way more practical. So you kind of just like, oh, like all I gotta do is like see the sunrise and make sure my room is dark and stuff like that. And that started really hitting home for me because at that point I already read like Dr. Matthew Walker's book on sleep, and that's actually a pretty good book. And especially when he was on Rogan, I think he really like changed the whole paradigm where like he was citing all these studies like, oh, like if you get like less than I don't remember, it's like 6 or 7 hours of sleep, you're like way more insulin resistant the next day. So everyone's talking about insulin resistance as a food thing, but this guy went on Rogan and he was saying like, oh, like it's probably just like you're not sleeping adequately or you're not sleeping well enough. And then he was talking about how there's research showing that your consistency for sleep may be more important than how many hours you're getting. So then I had all these things clicking for me, and then I was doing my job. I was like, all right, like these people, they're like tracking their calories and they're losing weight, but basically everyone always gained it back. And the research shows that as well. I believe within 1 year, it's like 75% of people gain everything back and more. And within 5 years, it's 95%. So basically, anyone who's ever lost weight gains it all back. And a lot of these people were like, I would tell them like, oh, you gotta sleep in a dark room. Like I wasn't super like I didn't know everything I know now
Hmm.
about it, but I did know like you have to sleep in the dark. And
Yeah.
these people were like, oh, I can't fall asleep without my TV being off. Like I need that background. So like I was talking about food
Wow.
where it wasn't even relevant because the average person is sleeping with the TV on, and that's going to negate like all the benefits of sleep. One, I guess, like a side note is a lot of people, athletes and stuff like that, think they're overtraining, but it's really hard to overtrain. I would argue it's kind of like they're phrasing it the wrong way. They're just under recovering because their
Mm.
sleep environment is just not the way it should be. And same thing with like food. Like you're like I said, like you're gonna be way more insulin resistant the next day. So you could be eating the same exact food, but if your sleep is like off, it's just gonna your body won't know what to do with it, and it's not gonna metabolize it the same way as if you were like outside grounded after like 8 hours of like good high quality sleep. So I was talking about the food, people were losing weight and then they were just gaining it all back. And it kind of took a while to figure out like, oh, like I'm just like wasting my time talking about the food because in the list of stuff that's important, it's probably like the last thing. Like I would say even like movement would be like more important than food in my opinion for weight loss.
Wow. So you were working as a nutritionist with outpatients looking to lose
Hmm.
weight, and you were seeing that they either weren't losing weight, or if they did, they gained it back.
Hmm.
And then you were noticing that they had extremely bad, I'll just say bad, sleeping environments.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Okay. And so let's dive into that a little bit. Um, the this Walker research and this
Yeah.
idea that there are things besides food that mess with our insulin levels.
Yeah.
This is hard for a lot of people to get their head around, and a lot of especially people who are trained in the biochemical models. So the more trained they are, like the
Yeah.
physicians, they're like, sorry, what are you talking about? That is impossible. So walk us through how it's possible and how that works.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I think part of it is nutrition has become like a big space. So like everyone talks about nutrition, like even the general person. So then a lot of people are almost like not open to hearing about like the sleep or the light because they're just like, oh, like nutrition is everything. So I think like the whole nutrition and fitness industry has basically just pushed everyone in the wrong direction. So even when you think you're like being like holistic and like you're doing the right thing and you're not like getting like doing what your doctor says, you're still like you're looking in the wrong direction basically because you're like, oh, like it's like exercise and what I'm eating is everything, where they're still missing the point, and it's hard to get people to be like, oh, like actually like it's the light that's way more important, but people just aren't like super open to it. But I'm sure like with Huberman and everyone else, people are going to come around. But anyways, as far as like actually answering your question, we can, I guess I'll start with like the Glen Jeffery study where I don't really cite many studies because I read a lot and I kind of forget them, but this one is like super
That's fine.
impactful. And as this one is super impactful, and I think it's the only one to date that's like done anything like it. But basically, he shined a red light on people's shoulder, and after they ate the meal, it was like 27% lower glucose as opposed to when they never got the red light stimulus. So basically, like your like instead of like let's say you ate a meal and your blood sugar would go to like 160, and if you just did like red light, it would be like 140 or 120. So it's like it totally changes it, and that's just like a couple minutes of red light on someone's shoulder. Now imagine like you're eating your meal outside. I actually want to test it on myself. Like, not that I would be a fan of like a CGM because you're wearing like a EMF thing 24/7, but it would be really interesting to test if you were sitting outside and eating meals versus inside, like N equals one. Like, I'll be inclined to imagine like your blood sugar will probably barely move, like no matter what you're eating, like if you're outside the whole time. So then that's like one aspect where like your like blood sugars have nothing to do with what you're eating, is strictly the light thing. There's
Right.
other research showing that if I mean it's actually pretty like standard advice now for like diabetes, but like doing a 10-minute walk after your meals. Like that's another thing that will drop blood sugar by like 20 to 30% right there. The reason being is like sugar, it enters glucose, it enters into your cells like two different ways. Normally you need like insulin to attach to the GLUT4 receptor, and it brings like the GLUT4 receptor, or it brings like the receptor to the surface of the cell so glucose can go in. But if you have muscle contraction, the glucose will just go into the cell, so it bypasses the whole process. So if you can just go outside and do some kind of exercise right after you eat, that also drops blood sugar a lot. So that's another thing where you could eat like the same meal, and one time you exercise right after, and one time you don't, and totally different.
Right.
And lastly, just a lot of like the sleep research shows that if you get inadequate sleep or you're sleeping in a room with light on, and basically anything that interferes with your sleep quality or quantity, you're going to be way more insulin resistant the following day. And there's a lot of studies showing that. So like while everyone is focusing on the whole food thing, it's kind of like, again, you can eat the same meal and do three different things and get totally different responses. So it's not really about like the food you're eating as much as it is where you are and what you're doing around that time. So it's all based on your environment.
Yes, and I think this is where we really get thrown for a loop, right? So I'm like, so I could eat a cheeseburger under fluorescent lights at
Yeah.
8 o'clock at night and have what, and my body will respond one way. I could eat a cheeseburger at solar noon outside and then go for a walk in the woods. Same cheeseburger,
Yeah.
but my biology is going to interpret the signal of that meal totally differently.
Yeah, I agree. That's the example I always use, actually. The example I always use is if you went to the farm and you got the best grass-fed regenerative steak like money could buy,
Mm-hmm.
and one time you ate it at noon outside while you're grounded and like your shirt's off, versus you're eating it at 10 p.m. right before you go to bed under blue light, like your body is going to respond totally different, and it's the highest quality food you could buy. So again, it's all the environment, like your time, the place, like Are you stressed when you're eating? All that stuff plays a major role on how your body utilizes that food.
Yeah, and this would seem to be a critical piece of information for people who are looking to lose weight, manage their weight, um, manage their diabetes, prevent type 2 diabetes, go through perimenopause and menopause more smoothly. Like, this is critical information. So tell me again, let's talk about just the piece of going for a walk outside after a meal.
Mhm.
You just explained what's going on in the body, but let's go over it one more time.
Yeah, sure. So exercise, like even if you're inside technically, exercise lets you utilize glucose with, without needing insulin. So no, like normal metabolism, let's say you're sedentary and like you're sitting when you're eating a meal. Basically, let's say I eat a potato, or it doesn't really matter, but let's say I ate a potato, you digest it, you absorb it, it enters your bloodstream as glucose. And now this glucose is floating around in your bloodstream. And obviously we know that's not good because that's basically what diabetes is. The glucose is in your bloodstream and it's too high for too long. And that's when people get like side effects like neuropathy, like vision issues, all that stuff. It's just because the glucose is there too long. So your body obviously compensates and it's like, oh, this is bad. So it wants to let the glucose into the cells. So that's what insulin is for. Like as you're eating, your pancreas releases insulin and it goes and attaches to all these cells and it attaches to the GLUT4 receptor and it brings the receptor to the surface. So that way the glucose can go into your cells. So that's not in your bloodstream anymore. And if you think about like what hemoglobin A1C is, that's just a measurement of how high your blood glucose is and for how long. And so like a 90-day average. But so like your body obviously compensates with the insulin to let stuff into cells. But exercise bypasses this whole product or this whole process where it allows the glucose to enter your cells without needing insulin. So even if you were like insulin resistant or someone was like diabetic, if they're just going for a walk, even though like your body is not responding to insulin, it's still going to respond to the exercise. So that's something really important that someone could do to help like deal with blood sugars better. And it doesn't take a whole lot. Like a lot of the research is like a 10-minute brisk walk, and that's super significant. And I believe the research is even done like inside because most research, because they want to try to control the environment as much as possible, is done indoors under blue light, and it still shows benefit, which is super crazy. Like now imagine if you're doing it outside. And like when you
Right.
read
Yeah.
and when you yeah, and when you read like John Ott's books, that's his big thing. He's like, all this research is all wrong and we can't apply this to real like the real life. I mean, I guess you could apply it to real life because everyone's inside all the time, but theoretically speaking, it should not be applicable because people should be outside.
Right.
But even under the blue light, and blue light seems to actually raise glucose, you still have benefit just from exercising. And then we know that red light or infrared light is really beneficial for your mitochondria. So it helps them work more efficiently. So if you're getting outside, your mitochondria are able to work better and they're able to let the glucose into cells. One of the theories I have actually is basically insulin resistance is actually like a survival mechanism because I think that it goes like if you think about like so if you start at the beginning like yes diabetes is bad but like and that's caused by insulin resistance but what causes insulin resistance in the first place, and I would say it's like mitochondrial dysfunction. So I think insulin resistance is a way for your mitochondria to protect themselves because as your mitochondria do their thing and work and create energy, you get reactive oxygen species, and they're actually good. Like if you exercise, you're creating extra, and it's good because they send the right messages. Like if you have mitochondria that are unhealthy, they'll get destroyed, stuff like that. But if your mitochondria are dysfunctional in the first place and they have to process all the sugar and stuff like that, it's just going to lead to further damage and they're probably just not repairing as well. So I think by becoming insulin resistant and not letting insulin into the cells, it's kind of protecting your mitochondria. So it kind of all goes back to the mitochondria at the end of the day. And red light, because it helps your mitochondria work better, would automatically help the glucose be metabolized more appropriately.
Beautiful. So we are I mean, we evolved to kind of move around in infrared light after we eat.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
kind of what we're made to do.
And just eating outside in the first place too.
Yes, absolutely. Um, okay. So how would you like what is your way of thinking about health overall through this quantum biologic lens?
Um, I guess what do you mean by that?
Well, in the introduction to your book,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
you are like, okay, this is how I see it, people.
Yeah.
And it's not what we're used, it's
Yeah.
what people on this podcast are used to. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, you are looking at health uh, at the intersection of quantum physics and biology.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess let me define like health first and like why it's important to be healthy. I think a lot of
Amazing.
people, yeah, I think people lose track and they make this their whole life, which is like the trap I fell into. But the reason why you're trying to be healthy in the first place is to be able to have the capacity to do like whatever you want to do. Like if I want to go for a 10-mile hike,
Yes. It's not to have the capacity to listen to more podcasts about health.
exactly.
Not that I
Yeah.
want you to stop listening to podcasts,
Yeah.
everybody. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if I want to go for a 10-mile hike tomorrow, or even though we know like flying in a plane is bad, if I, not that I'm into travel anyways, but if I want to travel somewhere to like Europe or something in a totally different time zone, I can go there. And even if I'm not going to feel my best, I'll recover and adapt pretty quick. So I think just being healthy is about being resilient. And I think the big mistake people make is they make their whole life about this stuff too. And that kind of takes away. And I think that probably creates stress, which is ironically unhealthy. So I think to begin with, you're just trying to have the capacity to do what you think is fun and enjoyable. So I think it's important to define health. And I think the reason why I really like the quantum as a way to be healthy is because most of the stuff you can do anywhere, anytime. So let's say you're traveling, for example, you can still see the sunrise, and it actually should make a more diligent effort to see the sunrise because it's going to help you sync your clock better. Same thing with getting grounded. Super beneficial. There's so much research on it. Lowers inflammation, basically just good for everything. Like as we evolved, we were always just grounded 24/7. And also, I guess, like side note again, all this stuff is just about reconnecting to nature. So the closer you can get to nature, just the healthier you're going to be anyways. But the reason I like the quantum is because like light, water, magnetism, technically it's all free. Like as long as you have the information and you're able to apply it, it's pretty practical. And when you think about light, you're basically just looking to spend as much time outside as you can, see the sunrise, make sure it's dark after sunrise. Like there's some really interesting research, and I haven't really heard many people talk about this, but lux, like it seems like like literally the brighter someone's day is, they typically end up being like leaner overall, like their BMIs are lower according to the research, and they're trying to lose weight, they tend to lose more weight. So it's just getting outside as much as possible is extremely important. And in some ways, it's like low hanging fruit because right now, as I'm doing this podcast, I'm outside. I could be inside doing it as well, but now I'm getting all the benefits of being outside, and there's like zero effort on my part. Like it doesn't matter where I'm sitting on this laptop, like it's kind of irrelevant. So I think just being able to like stack everything, or like if you not, I'm not a big fan of like spending money on this stuff, even though I have spent a lot of money and bought a lot of stuff that I regret buying. Like one thing would be like grounding sheets, for example, because again, like now you're just sleeping when you're grounded, and like there's no extra added effort on your part to do that. Well, you just buy the sheet, you wash it, and then you put it under your normal sheet. So just a lot of this stuff, if you can just like stack a lot of habits on top of each other, you just like stop thinking about it for a while. Like if you think about like exercise or food, you're always, you have to be diligent about it. Like most people are sedentary. So if I'm trying to get my 10,000 steps, I have to make an effort to go for walks and get that. Or food, like you have to go to a grocery store or the farm or whatever. You have to prepare it the right way. And if you're like in not ideal circumstances or you're traveling or whatever, that food, you don't even have full control over that. But like no matter where you are, and you can always like see the sunrise. You can always ideally make it dark at night. You can always get your bare feet on the ground. So I like quantum as a more approachable way to stay healthy. And like we talked about, like environment is number one. So this stuff will actually have a way bigger impact than your diet or how many days a week you're going to the gym and that sort of thing.
Yes. And I love that definition of health, and I think it's really true. Like I by no means have perfect quantum health days every single day.
Sure.
And recently, like I went to a conference and then I got back, and then my daughter had gymnastics competition, and we were in the, in these gyms with these
Yeah.
crazy lights, probably like what you did when you were wrestling.
Yeah, exactly.
And after that kind of like 10-day window, it was like I did not feel great, but I felt fine going through it because most
Yeah.
days I do it. And then the day after I got back, I just went and lay on the grass in the morning sunlight for like half an hour. Usually my schedule doesn't allow that, but I cleared it. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I just need to be
Yeah.
outside and recalibrate. So I like this message because I do find like we just love to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
We love extremism, we love purity tests, we love, okay, just tell me how I should do it, and then we put ourselves under the pressure to do it like that 100% of the time. And it's like, that conference and that competition, going to watch my daughter compete, like those were things that were really important to me. And so I can go do that because I have the resilience to be in a conference room under crappy lights for a couple of days. Because
Yeah,
a lot of the
exactly.
other days I don't do that, but I get to have choices and engage in the real world and not sequester myself in the
Yeah.
forest, as lovely
I
as that would be.
I totally agree. Like I still do jiu-jitsu a couple days a week, and I do that like on 7 p.m. under fluorescent lights. So it's definitely not ideal. I mean, it's exercise, I guess, but it's definitely not the right environment. But I have fun doing it, and I think like seeing the sunrise that morning and sleeping in the dark a lot like gives me the opportunity to do that. And I guess exercise, you get your heart rate up. So there's still like not like necessarily like a harmful thing, but it definitely does throw your circadian rhythm off, for example, because those 2 nights a week I'm doing it is definitely like suboptimal as opposed to like, all right, like at 7 p.m. or 8, I'm throwing on my red blue light blocking glasses and I'm gonna like wind down for a night, as opposed to like that's like intense exercise later at night. So it's definitely not ideal by any means, but being healthy and doing the right stuff most of the time allows you to do stuff that you find enjoyable.
Yeah.
It can't be like no one's ever gonna do this stuff if you can't have fun otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yes. It's not a punishment.
Yeah,
it's it,
exactly.
and it's not a purity test. We do what we can when we can. And yeah, I don't like own a ton of stuff. Um blue blockers and red night lights to read by,
Yeah.
infrared sauna, and a red light. I use more in the winter, not as much in the summer, and that's good. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't even
uh,
use my red light. I bought one and I actually bought it before I even knew who like Jack Reese was. I just like heard a lot of advertisements for it, so I bought it and I used it for a while. I'm like, hey, I can just go outside and get all the same benefits, so I don't know why I need this. So it's just like sitting in my closet collecting dust somewhere.
yes, no. If you could spend a lot of time outside, they are not necessary.
Yeah.
I don't spend all my day outside, so especially in the winter in the Northeast, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna supplement with my light supplements. And yeah, there's so many different ways to approach it. This conference I was at was called the Quantum Biology Forum,
Hmm.
and it was hosted by a big hospital system. And I was like, really? You guys are you guys are going to host a conference on this? And they
Hmm.
did. And there were a lot of academic scientists from big
Hmm.
institutions there. There were some practitioners, and there really was a genuine desire to shift this paradigm from all of those areas. Um, but at the same time, you know, I could tell there's going to be some compromises, right? Like the way a hospital system is going to implement it, they're talking about like mitochondrial transfusions, right?
Hmm.
Which is
Yeah.
so cool, and for someone who's really sick, amazing. But then, the counter argument was like, we're still not helping that person with the root cause if we're just like giving them a treatment. So there is going to be an ongoing discussion in this area, and it's just getting started.
Yeah. You would know better than me, but I think like it's like I work for like I mean, I guess like a big company, like an institution, if you will, same thing as like a hospital. And it would be like, all right, like how do we get these people to change out their lighting so people aren't under blue light 24/7? Like it could just be like super simple like that. But I think just like knowing like the company I work for, and it's probably the same for most of them, like that's just Like that just seems like such a tall order to even like hire someone to change all the lights just like incandescents. Like that basically seems impossible. So like it's cool that they're talking about like mitochondrial like transfusions, but like can you even like change light bulbs in like your hospital, you know?
Yes, no, exactly. And that I think these are going to be the ongoing conversations and the ongoing decisions. And, you know, uh, I think it's important for all of us to participate. And it's going to bring in, like, you know, those of us who've been hanging out on the internet with people who've been in a more institutionalized setting, and we're all going to have to come together and support each other. And I'm just kind of calling this out because I see it coming. So here, I didn't mean to, but that's what's going to
Yeah.
happen on this podcast, right? Like I'm just sort of like putting out the call to prepare ourselves emotionally and psychologically for that conversation, and, you know, perhaps be willing to support changes, even if it's like, that's not where I'd start. It's like, well, but maybe it's just a start. And you're seeing this firsthand. And I want to talk to you about this
Hmm.
because you have a job
Yep.
at an institution
Yep.
where your clients, you're just part of their day. They're
Yeah,
assigned to
exactly.
you. They have no choice.
Yeah,
They're just like,
exactly.
okay, now it's time to go talk to Ethan about my food. And then you have a private practice where people specifically seek you out
Yep.
for quantum health support.
Yep.
Tell me about the difference in those between those two sort of pools of people.
Yeah, it's like so different. You couldn't even like compare the two different groups for sure. So I guess as far as like the people I talk to and like my day in and day out, like my actual job, um, a lot of them they're just there because their doctor basically sent them. They don't they don't like a lot of them aren't even ready to make changes. Like one of the questions I always ask in my full-time job is like, why are you here? Or like, what are you trying to get out of this? Question like something like that, like why are you motivated to be here? Stuff like that. And a lot of the time it's just like, oh, my doctor told me to be here. So a lot of people don't even have the motivation. And it's like outpatient weight loss, it's elective. So they don't necessarily have to be there. And like a lot of insurance won't even like cover like a dietitian. Like some better ones will, but a lot of people just like a time and co-pays and all that stuff. So they're just not really motivated. And I would like my whole theory is I think the human body is super adaptable. So if you don't feel good, you don't know you don't feel good, if that makes sense. Like you don't know what it actually feels to feel good versus the people I notice in my practice, like the people who like send me an Instagram DM or sign up for coaching, they're trying to like optimize, or they're like, all right, like I'm waking up 2 or 3 times a night. I want to know why. So they're already doing way better than most people out there, but they probably know what feeling good is actually like, and they want to get back to that. So a lot of it's just like a really good example, like one of my most recent clients, he has a wife, he has kids, and he has a full-time job. So the question is, like, he's gonna lift weights because I mean, I don't think anyone disagree like having a little bit more muscle and lifting weights. Like there's so much research showing that's beneficial overall. So he's gonna lift weights, but he basically has to do it at 5:30 in the morning before he gets to work and before his kids wake up. So it's kind of just troubleshooting, like, all right, like what's the healthiest way I can do this at 5:30 in the morning? So everyone I see is already doing the right thing. And ironically, I'm a dietitian and I basically don't even talk about people's food. Like as far as like the like people who see me, they're typically eating 3 meals a day. They're not really snacking. They're a lot of them are low carb, so I try to get them to eat more carbs because I think, in my opinion, low carb is not a successful long-term strategy. I think there's times where it might be effective, but a lot of people are just like keto for years at a time, and in my opinion, that's just harmful for you. Actually, I think
How
there might be
come?
a
Tell us more about that.
yeah. I think it's stressful. Kind of like if you're in a calorie deficit for an extended period of time. I just think it's really stressful. And the one thing I've noticed with all these people who are lower carb is their sleep always is really bad. And as soon as they start adding carbs in, their sleep immediately improves. And since we talked about at the beginning, like sleep is basically one of the most important things. And that's like at the end of the day, like you're seeing sunrise and you're keeping it dark at night. Like, yes, that has benefits on its own, But the biggest benefit is probably you're going to sleep better that night, because the brighter your day, the better you're going to sleep at night. And the darker your night, the better you're going to sleep at night too. So sleep is number one. And if you are in a stressful state, same thing like bodybuilders who are trying to like get ready for a competition, for example, their sleep is horrible. Like everyone knows, like they can barely sleep. They almost, what's the, I forget what the word is, but when you're like wired all the time, manic,
Wired,
like
but
you're,
yeah,
yeah,
manic. Okay.
yeah, manic, yeah, that's the word. We're like, they're tired, but they just can't fall asleep. They're wired at night, and I just think it's because they're low carb. And I've seen it where people add carbs back in. Again, they should be seasonal and local, but when they add carbs back in, there's immediate benefits for sleep because you can relax. So I think that's probably the biggest benefit of it. And even just again, like Instagram, like anecdotal, like no one ever stays carnivore for years at a time. Like everyone always just ends up adding carbs back in sooner or later. Like Sean Baker's the only person I know of who's actually been like carnivore for like years, and he seems to be performing as good as ever. But yeah, that guy's just like built different anyways in the first place. He's
Okay.
deadlifting like 400 pounds for like 20 reps, which is crazy. But I
Wow.
mean, you're always gonna have like
Okay.
one-off people every once in a while who just
Mhm.
thrive on whatever. But for the most part, just from what I'm seeing, it's kind of like people are eating 3 meals a day. They're not really eating at night either. Like, and they're eating the right stuff. It's still like a protein, a vegetable, and a starch, something along those lines. Or like the low carb people will just be like a protein, maybe some vegetables and stuff like that. So everyone who sees me like in my practice, they're already like there's basically nothing to change other than maybe like eat a little bit more locally and eat a little bit more seasonally. But everything else is on point. They're typically not overeating either. So it's just about optimizing the little things to like improve sleep, improve how much time, how much light they're getting. Or for like I work in an office too. Like I just have a couple incandescent light bulbs I keep when I have the blue lights on as well, because that's where you're gonna get the red light in. So like little things that really make a big difference and like stack over time versus like full-time job where it's like I'm like if I told someone at my job to like keep an incandescent light by their laptop when they're working, like they're just gonna be like, what? Like I would probably get like fired from my job, you know? They're just like so far removed from that. So it's kind of like, all right, like we're just going to talk about food and maybe sleep a little bit. And I really try and make the sleep thing dramatic because it is, but I really wanted to hit home because most people are sleeping with like it's shocking because when you're like in we were talking about it before, but when you're like in this space of quantum, you're just so far removed from the average person. Like you gotta realize like the average person is sleeping with their lights on or their TV is playing in the background and they're wearing like their Apple Watch, which is emitting like EMS 24/7. So it's just like you get so far removed, like you kind of end up in this like rabbit hole, and you're like you read all the books and listen to all the podcasts, and then you're like, oh, like wait a second, like that person just ate like I don't know, like cookies at 11 p.m. under blue light, and they're gonna fall asleep with their TV on. So like you're kind of you really got to start with the basics. And if you tell them to see the sunrise, it's probably just not gonna go over well because they're there to see like a dietitian and talk about food. So it's just I think I think selection bias is definitely real too. Like for some people, they probably do change their diet, and that probably solves whatever problem they have. Like maybe like there's some like a select few people who, let's say you have like autoimmune issues or you're not sleeping well, and then you make a dietary change, like that might actually solve your problems. But then like the people I'm seeing, like I think they've probably already made that change based on the way they're eating. Like almost all of them like intermittent fast, just because if you're eating when the sun is only up, then you're basically intermittent fasting. So a lot of them have already done that and they're still experiencing issues. So it's kind of like refining like what's the next step. So I think like I'm just seeing those people who are like trying to feel better, but the diet thing just didn't cover their bases like it might for some other people.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that you live in both worlds. You live in the
Yeah.
world of the people who are um, actively seeking the next step, right? And
Yeah.
I guess that was me, which is how I ended up here, right? Like,
Yeah.
was it from the I was like on the patient client end,
Yeah.
trying to find this was years ago, trying to find someone who could take me beyond food.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you have these people who I want to say are outliers. And then at your day job, you have like the general population of
Yeah.
people who just truly have no idea. And I think, you know, back to what we were saying before is like everyone's going to come at this slightly differently, but we do it is probably worth remembering that we are the outliers. That being said, I do think most people want to feel good. They want to feel better, and they would potentially be willing to do the things that they need to do to get there. But the way that our culture is set up, it feels daunting, right? Like we come in and we're like, it's all about signals.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's your lights and your Wi-Fi. And if the people you live with are nice to you and you're nice back, right? Like it's everything. And if people are like, that's too much, and like their brain switches to off. So I think it's great that you wrote your book. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, sure.
Because these are the kinds of tools that we need to start that bridge, to start building out those bridges, without shutting people down, then helping them. We're all just helping each other along the road, pretty much.
Yeah, so I wrote my book as it started out as like a Google document. I'm definitely
Mm-hmm.
not the best writer anyways. I use like Grammarly and other stuff to like help me edit it. But it started out as like a Google Doc of like stuff I was seeing with clients. Just every time I read a book, my Instagram just like me posting books I read or like a big part of it. And I highlighted it, but I also like was like taking different notes, and I had like sections on like life, water, magnetism, movement, all that sort of thing. So I was able to just convert that into a book. And then like the first part of my book, it's more the science of like it's what ties everything together basically. So I focus on coherence. I
Mm-hmm.
read Maitland Ho's The Rainbow and the Worm, and I think that's probably like the best quantum book I've read by
Mm-hmm.
far. But basically, she talks about coherence, which would it's like an abstract concept. So the way I talked about in the book is like an analogy of like an orchestra. And if the orchestra is on point, like every single person in there is listening to the conductor, they're following the lead, it's going to be like a great show and a great performance. But if you have like one or two people who are like totally playing like off the beat, or maybe their instrument is out of tune, or like whatever the issue is, there's just a lack of coherence, and the show is going to suck. And it's the same thing in the human body. Like if there's a lack of coherence, I kind of use it synonymously as like communication as well. There's going to be a breakdown in communication, and the energy and the information is just not going to flow the way it's supposed to. And that's when you get health issues. So that's kind of like the theme of the book is how do you stay coherent? Like how do you have like good communication? How do you have the energy and information go to the right place at the right time when it's needed? Because if you can do that, then you should be in a pretty good state of health and you shouldn't really have any symptoms. So then like light, water, magnetism, time, temperature, food, movement, microbiome, all those things can impact your coherence. And there's definitely like pros and cons to both. For example, or not pros and cons, but like good things you can do and bad things you can do for both. For example, like red light or getting outside would be like a good thing to do for light. And then if you're sitting under fluorescent lights all day, that'd be like a bad thing to do for light. So like the good stuff will help build your coherence, and the bad stuff will break that coherence down. So I kind of went through and I broke down like all those things, like what are like the main like detrimental things like most people are doing, and what are the main things you can do to try to start rebuilding coherence. And then the last part of the book, which is probably the best, or I guess the last two parts, would be I went through like different kinds of light bulbs, um, like grounding sheets, like everything, like blue light blocking glasses, like everything you can actually do in your day-to-day life, like super application. Because actually, like at my job, even though I work with like normal people, like I wear yellow blue blocking glasses, and a lot of people actually make comments like they know what they are. So I think in some ways it's like a easier bridge to just focus on like they don't really care about coherence, but oh, like I'm gonna have less eye strain if I just wear these glasses, so that's probably a good thing. I know like some eye doctors, they actually even prescribe like blue light blocking glasses now, but unfortunately they're like the clear ones, which we know don't actually do anything. But I did have one person who had like really serious migraines, so she actually wore like red ones, like even during the day, and that actually did seem to help her from what she was saying. I always ask about it because I do have like the random person who's like, oh, like what do you think about grounding? Like that does happen. It's just very rare. Maybe like once a month or once every couple months. Like it's rare, but you do get a person like that every once in a while. So I really try to go over like, all right, like for like the movement section, for example, like you should probably be doing 8 to 12,000 steps a day, just and ideally outside because like the research, even like the research, like it's not all survey data, so I'm sure it probably is like most of the steps are outside, but the average American does 4,000 steps, like 3,500, 4,000 steps. And if someone does 8,000 steps, their all cause mortality is down by like 50%. And if it's 12,000 steps, there is down by like 65%. So you're just doing 12,000 steps. That's one of the best things you can do for your health. And then like some cardio is
Right.
super important for mitochondria. So again, it's just going to make them work more efficiently, and lifting weights builds muscle, which is going to also help your mitochondria, and you're going to make more of it. So I went through like every single section, and I was able to, or hopefully I was able to like find ways to do this to build coherence and like remedies. Like, all right, like I'm in an office, there's blue light, but I'm just gonna have my incandescent light, and I'm gonna try to go outside as much as possible on breaks when I can, just to like reset the clock and all that stuff.
Yeah, love it. So let's wrap up
Okay.
talking a little bit more about coherence. So
Okay.
this is a quantum physics word
Sure.
that is now, I think, an integral part of biology. So there's a
Hmm.
few different ways to use that word. It
Yep.
can be used sort of more
Yeah.
holistically, esoterically, but
Yeah.
it also has just like a definite scientific um, way of being used. So
Uh-huh.
let's focus on that one because that seemed to be how you talked about it in your book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the orchestra is the metaphor.
Correct. Yeah.
And let's just go into the science a little before we wrap.
Yeah. So I would say, and this is like I'm definitely not a physicist by any means, but I
Good,
was
because this is what we're here for. We're
yeah.
here to talk to people who just want to understand it enough to
Yeah.
keep going. We're
So
not
I
doing a deep
yeah.
academic
Yeah.
analysis here.
Yeah, so it's kind of like what I said. I would say coherence means that your cells are organized and synchronized. Energy and signals and information kind of just move the way they're supposed to. But Mei-Wen Ho talked about it as like quantum coherence. So basically, from the like every electron through like every organ, so like big scale versus small scale, and like cells and stuff are in between, everything is lined up and everything is on the same page. Maybe like another practical application would be like stress. Let's say like you're in the woods and you see a bear. Like you have so many body systems that change at the same time. And if it was like the standard like biochemistry, there's no way things can change that fast biochemically. But because you're coherent and your body is moving on like the quantum scale, your whole body is able to switch all these systems at the same time. So that's kind of how I think about coherence. Hopefully that's like a pretty good way to describe it. Yeah, and it basically just shows up when light exposure, your mitochondria, hormones, everything just it's on the same page.
Right. And that's why we can bring everything back to supporting our mitochondrial health. And the way that we've been taught to look at it with food and supplements, although those things, of course, have a place,
Mhm.
they are downstream of what you're talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think like the whole like it's kind of like one of my soapboxes, but like the whole like food and like supplements specifically, like you're just selling stuff, but that's not actually fixing the problem. Like the problem is a lack of coherence or mitochondrial dysfunction. I'll probably say those. I mean, I guess if you're yeah, I guess you can't have one without the other. Like your mitochondria have to be working well if you want to be coherent. And if your mitochondria are not working well, there's no way you would be coherent. So I guess that you really can't have one without the other. But like if you're taking supplements, it's not going to fix your mitochondria or your coherence. And same thing with like you change your diet, but it's not really fixing those things. As opposed to like, oh, like you're seeing the light, that's gonna go into your eyes. It's gonna program the SCN, which is your master clock, and that's gonna send signals to all the other little clocks throughout your body. Like that's gonna build coherence.
Right. And then supplements can be like supportive bridges from one place to another in on as a adjunct to the underlying habits of supporting our mitochondrial function and our coherence.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not the biggest fan of supplements at all, other than maybe like a really good mineral supplement.
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of like Keton, isotonic, or hypertonic, depending on
Yeah,
which one.
love that stuff.
But that's basically like that's the only supplement I personally take. Um, and no affiliation or anything. I just think it's awesome. Like so that's the only
Yeah.
thing I've ever taken where I've actually noticed a difference. Everything else you just take and you're like, I hope this is doing something, basically.
Yeah.
But that's one where like if I ran out a couple of times and I was like procrastinating ordering it, or like if I went on vacation one time and I forgot to take it with me,
Hmm.
and like I definitely noticed a difference with that. But so I think like our soil is so depleted with minerals, and you need minerals for everything. Like even like you think about sodium, potassium, it creates like an electrical gradient, and our whole body is electric anyways. So minerals play a huge role. But again, like I would say, like it's kind of funny. Everyone does it backwards. Like everyone's focused on the whole supplement thing, where really like you should fix the light and your sleep first, and then like if you're still having issues, maybe like a supplement might be a good idea in a certain for a certain person at a certain time in a certain place, perhaps. But everyone's
Yeah.
always like, I'm gonna take all these supplements, and then they don't even see the sunrise. It's kind of like missing the point. I remember I was reading. There's a bodybuilder. His name is Stan Everding. Before I was into quantum, I was into like lifting weights and all that stuff. And Stan, in his book, it's one of my favorite quotes. He goes, if you're taking creatine and you're not getting 8 hours of sleep, that's like snorting cocaine through a $1 bill. You're just missing the whole point. And that it makes me laugh every time. But he's so
Yeah.
right. That's how I think about supplements. Like if you're not seeing the sunrise and you're taking all these supplements, you're just missing the whole point.
Yeah, and you're correcting for things that you may not
Yeah.
need to correct for if you are in coherence.
Yeah.
And so get in coherence and then see if potentially, you need anything else. Um yeah, I think, yeah, and again there are different, people have different approaches to that, but definitely from a quantum health perspective, the practitioners I know like start with the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And the fundamentals, especially like the light piece, is just so missing and has been so destroyed. I mean, like we couldn't have destroyed our light environment any
Yeah.
more than we have. Like, when I
Yeah,
think about
definitely.
it.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, like we always ate food. It's just like now we eat like bad food or like not the way, or like we've always moved and now we just move less. But like
Yeah.
the whole like blue light thing or like EMFs, that simply like never existed. And then I'll throw like microplastics or just chemicals like that in there as well. Like those things simply never existed. And now like in 100 years, we're just getting like a brand new stimulus versus like, yeah, you're eating processed food, but you're still eating food. Like we've had like wheat for like 10,000 years. Like your body has like some ability to process it even though it's not ideal, versus like your body can't process like 100% blue light when you're sitting in an office indoors. Like it's definitely like a major problem. And I think light is also very approachable versus something like EMFs, where like you're surrounded by it at all times. Their cell phone towers, like even if you turn off your Wi-Fi at night, your neighbor who's probably pretty close to you still has it on. So that's kind of like a tough one to battle. Versus light, you have a lot of control over that, which is a plus. I think like even if you don't buy the full like quantum like story, the light is like, oh, I just gotta see the sunrise and keep it dark at night and get outside during the day. Like it's very approachable for most people.
Yeah. And most people I know who are from, like, let's say the pool of people who've never heard of this,
Mhm.
when they make those small changes, they tend to be very surprised what a difference it makes.
Yeah.
And I remember I was catching up with a woman who I know in a completely different context from quantum health, telling her a little bit about what I was working on. And she was like, really? Light, huh? And she's like, yeah, I'm just remembering. She's like, I had an uncle. He started really gaining a lot of weight,
Mhm.
and she's like, it was getting really bad.
Yeah.
And she said, and then I didn't see him for a while, and I saw him like 6 months later, and he looked great.
Yeah.
And I said, what did you change? And he said, I stopped driving to the train station.
Mhm.
So I walk to the train station in the morning
Yeah.
and I walk home from the train station in the evening.
Yeah.
And she was like, we all just thought it was the steps.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just gonna go inside quickly because it starts to rain.
Okay.
But yeah, one of my buddies, Brady, he has his whole theory. He lives in Philly, which is a city, and he's actually the one who came up with quantum dietitian, like the my Instagram handle. I'm not creative enough to come up with that. But basically, one of the things he mentioned was like cities, the way they're built, or actually, I guess the suburbs. Like most people live in the suburbs, and the problem is it's not walkable whatsoever. So most people aren't willing to do intentional changes. If it gets bad, people will. But if you think about like a lot of places or populations that are healthier overall on a bigger picture, they're all typically walking more because like if you're in a city, like you have to walk. Like he gets like 15 or 20,000 steps just living his life every single day.
Yeah.
So even if he knows nothing about quantum, which I mean, I guess he does because of me, but even if he knew nothing about it, now he's getting hours outside every single day, and now he's moving too, but he's getting that sun. So even if he knew nothing about getting a sunrise, like everyone who like wakes up and walks to work in Philly is going to see the sunrise. And I think you see that like wealthier places and places that are cities, like the populations overall are like way leaner and way healthier, just because even though they know nothing about this, it's just the fact that they're in a place that lends itself better to being healthier versus like I live in the suburbs and I live in like a wealthier place, so a lot of people are out and about going for walks around sunrise anyways. But like if you look at like Midwest and stuff like that, where people can't actually walk anywhere, there's nowhere to go. People are way more overweight, and I think it's just like the infrastructure as a whole.
Yes. No, back to that idea that we've kind of created a structure where the
Yeah.
default mode is really bad for us. And I think like a goal that we could all agree on, no matter what angle you're coming from, is that if we could create a default structure for day-to-day life that has on balance higher coherent inputs and
Yep.
lower coherent destroying inputs,
Yeah, exactly.
we'd be in a different place.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Ethan, this was super fun. Congratulations on writing that book.
Thank you.
So my day job is as a career coach,
Uh-huh.
and I just want to say nobody ever sees their own inherent skills. They just
Uh-huh.
are like, oh, everyone does that. So your
Yeah.
ability to write such a concise and clear, basically it's a textbook.
Yeah.
I know you're going to do
Yeah,
a
maybe too much
version
so.
that's a
Yeah.
little more that's
Yeah.
for
Approachable, yeah.
for the for the layperson. But your ability to do that, and even just to sit down and do it and publish it, and
Mhm.
it's written in very clear, easy to understand language. So I'm going to be adding it to the reading list over at the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology.
Mhm.
And I really encourage everybody to take that book, to go read that book. And I guess my point in this comment was that is not everyone's able or willing to do that. That is
Yeah.
a talent that you have and that you have honed through your education. So
Thank you. I appreciate it.
thanks for making that important contribution.
Thank
And
you.
the book is called
Quantum Nutrition. The invisible I believe it's a long subtitle. I believe I wish I could remember. It's like the invisible signals.
Okay, listen, I got it. I have it here. I pulled it up. Okay. Quantum Nutrition, the unseen signals that shape your metabolism, mitochondria, and long-term health.
Yeah, there we go.
Nice. Beautiful. Any last thoughts? And also, okay, so people can find you, Quantum Dietitian, on Instagram. Yep. And the book's on Amazon.
It is on Amazon.
Okay.
And the ebook is on my website, and I actually ordered paper copies. Everyone kept like messaging me on Instagram asking if I'm gonna sell. It's like a lot of people don't want to give Amazon their money because Amazon takes most of it. So I did order paper books, and I'm sure like by the time this is released, I'll have paper books on my website too, because I'm getting them in like Thursday. So
great. Yeah, no, that definitely. Okay. And your website is
same thing, quantumdietitian.com.
quantumdietitian.com. Okay, so go find Ethan on Instagram, go to his website to get the book. And yeah, thank you so much. This was really fun. You have made it to the end of another episode of the QBC podcast. Congratulations and well done. Don't forget to visit us at qbcpod.com. That's qbcpod.com. You can find all of the episodes, all the links in the show notes, the tools that I use, links to the Institute, all of the things. And please do join the QBC free community if you haven't. That's where we send most of our updates. All right. Thanks for being here. If you also, please make sure you rate this podcast wherever you listen to it. There's so many millions of places these days, but it really helps. We really appreciate it. Thank you for being here.